It's the real news. I'm Aaron Matek. Puerto Rico is devastated in the aftermath of Hurricane Maria. The island is without power and mostly without communication, and this could last for months. But the crisis Puerto Rico faces is not just the result of this disaster, but very much human-made. Monxo Lopez is a professor at Hunter College, Department of Africana, Puerto Rican, Latino Studies. Professor, welcome.
Thank you, and thank you for having me.
Let's start with what you know right now about where the situation is at in Puerto Rico, just 2 days after Maria hit the island.
Yes, this is really desperate, desperate situation. We have people that went to the airport this morning, and they've been told that at the earliest they will be able to fly out or in to the island on Tuesday. So we have no way of getting goods to the island at the moment. And I'm talking about the government, I'm talking about FEMA, I'm talking about the military, I'm talking about like private NGOs. It's a really desperate situation in terms of relief efforts. In terms of communications, we haven't heard from, many of us haven't heard from our families. And so it's been, I believe, 3 days now, and many of us have had no communication whatsoever with whole regions of the island. There are towns that we don't know what's going on. We don't know their casualties, we don't know their needs, and so it's a really dire situation.
And let's start with the electricity. Now, Puerto Rico's power utility has been struggling for many years in heavy debt and has been paying off its debt and not investing in the vital infrastructure that it needs to service the island. Can you talk about the connection between this history and what the island is facing now?
Yes, listen, I'm a progressive left-wing activist, like really to the left, but even the governor of Puerto Rico, who is right-wing and who, you know, represents the pro-statehood, pro-American forces in the ideological spectrum of Puerto Rico, like he's saying right now that the cuts and the fragility of our utilities in terms of electricity, it's due to the debt situation and basically the situation where we've been privileging paying the debt and paying the people, the vulture funds, rather than buttressing and supporting the public utilities. And so, like when you have a right-wing, pro-American governor telling you that the fragility of our electricity network and of our aqueduct network, the water network, it's due to the debt situation, that's saying something.
So, Professor, just explain that for people who aren't familiar with this background. Why is Puerto Rico paying off these vulture funds?
Yes, well, it's a very complicated story, but long story short, like Puerto Rico has been, for all intent and purposes, has been placed under a receivership. The Puerto Rican people are able to vote for their own governor and their elected officials and so on and so forth. But the U.S. Congress, under President Obama, imposed a fiscal control board that it's basically the organization, the institution running the government right now. These are unelected people that come from the banking, the finance industry, and everything of any significance that is done or approved by the government of Puerto Rico, by the elected officials in Puerto Rico, has to be vetted and approved by the Fiscal Control Board. And that receivership, the main purpose of that receivership is to assure that the people that have loaned money at shark loan interest to the Puerto Rican government throughout the years get prioritized in receiving the payments for the money that they loaned to the governments of Puerto Rico. And so one situation here, very key, is that we really have not audited that debt. So there are figures thrown around, 70 million, 90 million, 70 billion, $90 billion, $150 billion. We really don't know. We really don't know who owns that debt. We don't know the constitutionality of that debt. And we don't even know to who we own that debt in full, because the vulture funds and some people within the government of Puerto Rico have made it impossible for the Puerto Rican people to audit that debt and to have clarity and transparency about the debt. So that's where we are right now, paying a debt in the dark and under receivership, so that vulture funds, hedge fund managers here in New York City get their, their goodies, and the Puerto Rican people are suffering and paying dearly for it. And this hurricane exposes that.
So I just want to stress what the impact of this background is now on the utility and how that is making this power crisis worse. So PREPA, the utility, has lost something like 30% of its workforce since 2012, yes, mostly in skilled labor, people that are vital to keeping up and improving the infrastructure that the island needs. And it also means that because they're paying off this debt, they have to cut back on basics like cutting tree lines, right? That yes, sorry, go ahead.
No, yes, it's a very it's a very common situation nowadays all over the world. Basically, these people, these vulture funds, are leaning on the government with everything they have. They have bought the support through lobbying efforts in the U.S. Congress, and they're leaning as hard as they can on the government of Puerto Rico and the people of Puerto Rico to force them in the usual neoliberal privatization dynamics that we've seen not work anywhere, And so, listen, the hurricane is exposing the colonial trappings that Puerto Rico is under. It is a colony of the United States, private interests in the United States, very powerful private interests in finance, also the U.S. military. They want Puerto Rico to remain a colony of the United States, and this hurricane has blown away all the trappings of the colonial infrastructure. It's super transparent what's going on, and it's clear that this is a human-made catastrophe. Obviously, we haven't had these superstorms never in the Caribbean. Like, since we are keeping records of hurricanes in the Caribbean in around the 1850s, we haven't had a Category 5 hurricane touch ground in the Caribbean. This year, we've had already 2. And so that's also a human-made catastrophe. That's due to global warming. Rich countries all over Europe and the developed countries in the world are responsible for global warming, and the people that are on the receiving end, like in vulnerable areas like the Caribbean, you have situations like the debt crisis in Puerto Rico that it's making really basically impossible for the people of Puerto Rico to face this catastrophe with any chances of winning.
Let me read you a couple of newspaper items just to underscore this further. Okay, so there was a piece in the Wall Street Journal in June, and the headline is simply, "For Sale, Puerto Rico." And the first sentence is, "Puerto Rico has no cash and can't borrow money anymore, so it is looking to sell itself off in parts." And one of those parts is the utility that we've been talking about. There's another piece that just appeared in the Washington Post, and it's by Rutgers professor Yarimar Bonilla. And she describes talking to a local wealth manager in Puerto Rico. And the wealth manager says this: "The only thing we need now is a hurricane." And Bonilla adds, she was referring to how such natural disasters bring in federal money for rebuilding and often become a boon to the construction industry. As I left her office, she encouraged me to buy stock in Home Depot. So, Professor Lopez, yes. I'm wondering if you could talk about this. Now, because aid might be coming in, whether there are some people on the island who stand to profit from this, and what is the answer to a island that's already been struggling so hard to assert control over its own affairs, now being further devastated by this awful disaster?
Yes, well, like here in the diaspora all over the United States, we are mounting a campaign to demand that the companies that have profited for decades, made billions of dollars off Puerto Rico and off Puerto Ricans, such as Delta Airlines, American Airlines, JetBlue, and the big retail shops like Walmart, Costco, Home Depot, that they make a lot of business in Puerto Rico, that they lend a hand to the Puerto Rican people. Like, listen, it's gonna sound dramatic, but it is what it is. Like, these people, all of these multinational companies, either lend a hand now so that Puerto Rico can survive and they can keep selling in the long term their goods and their services to Puerto Rico, or they will make a quick buck and run out of business in Puerto Rico in the next year or two. Like, either they help the island now or they will have to close shop. And so we are asking, mostly at the moment, we're asking the big retailers like Walmart, Home Depot, Amazon, and Costco to sell at cost all items that are going to be dedicated for the relief effort in Puerto Rico. Okay, so no profit for them in selling any items for the relief effort. Number two, for them to match whatever people buy during the relief effort. So if I buy a gas stove, for these people to offer, to gift us a gas stove in a matching scheme, so we can maximize the help to Puerto Rico. And three, if applicable, to offer free shipping. So we don't want to waste monies in shipping costs that should be going to the people of Puerto Rico.
Monxo Lopez, we're going to stay on this story, and we hope you can come back on to join us soon. Monxo Lopez is a professor at Hunter College in the Department of Africana, Puerto Rican, and Latino Studies. Professor, thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us on The Real News.
Yes.